I'm co-host James Ash.
And I'm co-host Phil Scaife.
Welcome to the Business Lockdown. Welcome to today's episode, The Round Table. I am joined once again. We are all joined once again. We're joining forces from losers and winners in life, which we'll be exploring over today's episode. We are covering Netflix special Losers today. So here is the trailer.
That's not a good thing.
He's going to get a piece of it. He may have it.
She was not expected to actually win the race.
It's all about winning. Winning.
Anybody who goes to a football match expecting to win is an idiot, I think.
Oh, my dear.
He's 100% in his career loser. He muttered to me, if you'll excuse my English, shit, I've lost it.
Losing is a habit. When you get that mindset, then you think you're never going to win a game again.
I said, that's it. I'm done with basketball.
I've said it to him many times. You're the biggest waste of talent I've ever seen.
I had never encountered that kind of darkness before, but I knew I had something to prove.
If you're fourth, it's like, what would have, could have, should have? That would probably haunt me. I'm sure it haunts her.
No, he missed it.
He was distraught. He was just saying, I'm never going to curl again.
Things happen for a reason, you know? And now, which part of yourself is going to come out? Who are you really? What are you made of?
If you're not going to be a good loser, you're not going to be a good winner either.
Many days you feel like crying, but winning is not the most important thing in life.
What's up, coach? Getting knocked out was the best thing that ever happened to me.
There have been more downs than ups, but in a way, that makes the ups feel all the better.
So, in a Winning is Everything Society, how do we handle failure? The series profiles athletes who have turned the agony of defeat into human triumph. And one thing I love that I thought was awesome to introduce, which was on the final episode, and the guy said, a society cannot make do with only talking about victory. We always say that we learn more from defeat than from victory. So if we learn from defeat, we should pay a bit more attention to those who lose. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. How are we all doing?
Very good. Yeah, very good, James.
Fantastic,
Awesome.
James. How are you?
Yeah, very good. I'm really excited about this. We featured we did the round table episode last time, and it was focusing on some of the world's best coaches, which is kind of plays into this perfectly, really, where we look at defeat and loss, and some people who have had some people and teams who have had some very bad luck along the way. But something I want us to kind of like really explore today is the kind of concept that you can learn more. There can be more positives from defeat than there can be from victory. And I think that I'm really excited to be picking some examples from you all personally and professionally. So yeah, if you guys want to introduce yourselves, do a round robin, who you are, where you come from, and then we will crack on, gentlemen.
Yeah, hi there, James. Thanks for welcoming us. Obviously, I'm Phil. I'm the co-host of the Business Lockdown with your good self. And pleased to be here.
Yeah, I'm Jonathan. I love doing the Business Lockdown with you, James and Phil. I'm looking forward to discussing this with the two deans. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, my name's Dean, and I just want to thank you guys because I got to lie on the couch watching this series and telling the wife that I was working. So I loved it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm Dean, and I can only echo the other Dean. Like, what a fantastic series, and thank you for getting me involved in it. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. And I can certainly echo that. I will, from a personal point, have literally just had 11 puppies in the past 24 hours. And the fact that I could lay on the couch with little puppies, feeding them and doing work, this was the perfect form of work. So thank you, guys. And I can certainly echo what you've said there, Dean. Well, we'll just run quickly through the 8 episodes and what they essentially cover. The first one is Michael Bentt, and a former boxing champion. Episode 2, The Jaws of Victory, and that's looking at English soccer club Torquay United, which we all felt was an interesting one to throw into the series. Number 3 is Judgment, and that's Surya Bonaly, who was a dazzling figure skater and in a mostly white sport, and made it tough to be fairly judged on the world stage. Number 4 was Stone Cold, an unbelievable loss in the 1985 Canadian Championship, and that was Pat Ryan. And he was dominant in strategy that changed the sport forever. We've got number 5 was Lost in the Desert. That was intense. That was an intense one. I'm looking forward to talking about that one, which was essentially, Olympian Mauro Prosperi from Sicily in Italy. It was the Moroccan desert, arguably the hardest foot running race in the world, and he got lost. And there's some interesting tales from that episode. Number 6 was Aliy Zirkle and a sled dog Musha. That was very interesting as well. And like a lot of these, just getting a bit of insight into a very different sport and culture, along with the concept of loss and just missing out on victory. And that was a very interesting episode. Number 7, Black Jack, and that was Playground Hoops legend Jack Ryan's shot at a pro career, and that was very interesting in terms of he had all of the talent and all of the skill, and he just didn't apply that in the right way, or wasn't able to apply that in the right way to become a pro. And then we finished number 8, episode 8 was called the 72nd hole. Golfer Jean Van de Velde, a French guy who became France's #1 golfer, who when it all fell down on the last when the British Championship, the 1990 Open Championship. That was tough to finish up with, to watch his demise. But looking at all of those gentlemen, I mean, when we had the round table and we were exploring some of the world's best coaches, I would suggest there was a little bit more of a consistent running theme, and then how these coaches worked their way into that. I felt this series took you on a great, more varied journey. I'd be interested to hear your points of view on that. And with that in mind, it's almost very, for me, difficult. Where do we begin on this? Because there's so much we can go at. We are limited to 60 minutes. I mean, I've already talked too much, so we've not got 60 minutes anymore. But I mean, who wants to start us off? I'm curious. I think the first question I've had in mind when I've thought about starting this was, what's the episode that really hit you the most? And that you can answer that in whatever way you choose. What hit you the most? What stood out and why? And I'll open the floor to that one.
Well, do you want me to start, James?
Absolutely.
The one that hit me the most, actually, in fact, the one I enjoyed the most was Stones, I think, because that was an insight to a sport which basically was to be honest, it was like a pub sport, wasn't it? So they all beer drinking, camaraderie, smoking, even on ashtrays on the ice. I mean, it was quite unbelievable. And then this guy comes along and says, I'm not going to do it like that. And he had 4 rules that everybody, was it 4 or 5 rules that everybody had to apply to? No drinking, no smoking, no sex, bed early, and really absolutely laser guided focus about one thing, is winning. And they devised a plan to actually just dominate the sport, and that's absolutely what they did. And they dominated it so much that the crowd turned on them because it was boring what they were doing, but they were winning. They could not stop winning, and eventually the sport actually had to change the rules to make it more exciting, but they carried on winning. So I mean, that was the most amazing story. So that's my vote.
Yeah, they brought in the free guard zone, which essentially made their style of play illegal.
That's
I mean,
right.
there's no getting around it. It made their style of play illegal. So you're like, right, okay. And the fact they came back the following year and won it anyway under the new rules.
Yeah, it's like saying, like a team that's really good at heading the ball from corners, saying, well, we're not going to do corners anymore because you're too good at them.
Yeah, I mean, that was for someone, and didn't you love it when they were stood there and everyone was shouting boring?
Yeah,
and they loved it. Yeah. Felt if that amount of people have an issue with it, that was the ultimate.
They knew
for them.
that. Well, for them, they knew they'd won, didn't they? They from their perspective.
I did have an issue, and the final one of the rules, no sex, and you think, well, what's the point of getting involved in curling? I mean, surely that's what it's all about, right? Is being a curling champion. I thought, well, that's. I was looking at that and I was thinking, yeah, I could really get into this sport. And then the last week, like, what's the point? I mean, that's the ultimate of being a professional curling athlete. But that was certainly interesting. Phil, what was yours?
Well, so for me, I'm going in a slightly different direction. The basketball story about blackjack.
Mm-hmm.
What I liked in there was the fact that his success, where he appeared to be the happiest man on the planet, wasn't based on a world title or on money. It was based on entertaining kids for the Wizards, and so I mean he threw away all those opportunities, either consciously or subconsciously, for the monetary glory, and then he found. I thought he was the one that found his true success that really seemed to resonate with him not in front of, gold medals and millions of fans, literally just in front of kids, just putting smiles on their faces. And that end to that felt really, really genuine and different to the other episodes that were about. Some of them were about obviously a sporting defeat and then further sporting glory. So yeah, I think that was the one I got the most from blackjack.
That's the one I agree with you as well, Phil, because it's completely different. You're looking at a completely different end of the spectrum. So you're talking about somebody in the first one that is completely dedicated, what Jonathan mentioned, and then you're talking to somebody who changed the rules because of their dedication and because they was so dedicated to their craft. They just saw winning, and that's what they wanted to do, and they give up their whole life to do it. And then you've got Jack Ryan, who all he wants to do is go out, get drunk. He turns up to practice drunk. And so that was the most impactful for me, because it just shows what you can achieve on one end of the spectrum if you really set your mind to it. And then on the other end of the spectrum, even though you've got all the talent in the world, one of the best basketball players there is, and you don't end up doing anything with it. Subconsciously or consciously, he definitely sabotaged himself. And at the end, it was so nice to see that he looks a brilliant dad to his daughter. And he genuinely looks so happy. And I just, all the way through that episode, I just felt so sorry for him, because I wondered where the ending, I'd never heard of him before. I wondered where the ending was going to be. And I was so happy that he found his happy place. And it wasn't what we would call happy in terms of normal success, the barriers and the bars that we all set. But he found his happiness somewhere completely different. And that for me was a really impactful episode.
Interestingly enough, Dean, just what you just said there, I think that he was happy pressing that self-destruction button. And also, same with Michael Bentt. He never wanted to be a boxer. He just happened to be in that place, and by almost like by pure chance, he was that good at it, became the world champion. But he just didn't want to be there. So as soon as he could get out of it, he did.
That was really impactful for me when Bentt got knocked down in the first title defense by Hyde. And when he found out his dad said let him die when he was in a coma or in hospital. Yeah. I thought, holy moly, that just tells you what sort of different life he has had to myself or most other people, where it's unconditional love, and he hasn't had that growing up at all.
And Saint Blackjack had the same same father, didn't he? Yeah, same type of father. Yeah. Clearly not the same father.
Yeah, and there's a great saying that Michael Bentt said, and we'll focus more on this as we move through the episode. But he said that the knockout was the best thing that ever happened to him. Otherwise, he would still be playing the role of the boxer and wearing a mask. and being someone he wasn't. And essentially that was it. That was really strong when he said that, and that impactful, and the journey that followed that was his right path, but he didn't actually know it, did he, at the time? But if it wasn't for that loss, if it wasn't for that feeling and that, I guess at the time, what many would see as a really unfortunate, as something that wasn't planned, he would have wanted victory. He ends up being in a Hollywood movie with Will Smith in the movie Ali, and then had a part to play in $1 Million Baby with Clint Eastwood. And it's incredible, isn't it, the path that someone can take after they suffer such a loss there. Dean Grimshawe, what was yours?
Yeah, mine's slightly different. And the one that got me was Surya Bonaly and the figure skating competition, because for a start, it was a sport that I didn't know anything about. I'd never really been exposed to, never really followed. And her story just really gripped me because, we talk about losers as, throwing it away and not quite making the grade, but she kind of did everything right. She was dedicated, she sacrificed, she was extremely hardworking, and she committed everything to her craft, but it was just never enough. And there was the whole controversial story, of her background and was she the right person for the sport, blah, blah, blah. And it's funny how you mentioned with Michael Bentt and Blackjack, how they kind of create their own failure, possibly through, their own paradigms, and they didn't fit into that world. Mm-hmm. And that was when I was kind of getting quite distressed following Surya's story, especially that point where she didn't get on the podium. And as I was watching it, I could feel her pain, and I was kind of torn whether she was doing the right or wrong thing. But I could just so understand what she was going through, because she'd literally done everything, and in her heart and in her mind, she was the best. But she just still never ever got that accolade. And I think what was amazing at the end was when she turned pro and she realised, well, the shackles are off. I could just be me. And the skater and the dream within her never, ever, ever lost its fire through all of the losses, all the hardships, all of the brick walls that she was smashing herself into. She never, ever lost the passion for what she really, really loved. And as soon as she could actually just skate as a professional with no rules, no restrictions, I found that a really powerful story.
Yeah, I really like the part when she got to the Olympics and she had a routine, and then she just said, sod it. And she's the only other person who's done the forward flip, and she lands it, and again and again and again. And of course, it's illegal, so she was marked down. She ended up becoming 12th, but of course,
well, I think
crowd absolutely
almost
loved
like
her.
the proverbial two fingers, wasn't it? Because
it's exactly.
She was staying injured. Like, she had a real bad, was it Achilles injury?
Achilles,
so she wasn't really comfortable on the ice. And then it got to the point she goes, do you know what, I'm going to do it. And as she did it, she knew straight away she was going to get disqualified. But I think at that point, she kind of accepted that the sport just couldn't contain her, didn't have a place for her.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So she was like, well, I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah.
And I like that.
On the other episodes, the people lose to either an opponent that's better than them or to themselves. But in that episode, she more or less loses to society, doesn't she? You don't feel like she's been beaten by a better skater. It feels like society and the culture that's in ice skating is what she's lost to, which is and I suppose you've got to frame that differently to how you frame losing to an opponent or losing to yourself, I guess.
That was it. It's almost like the only way she could win was to sort of give up a part of herself and just conform. And then that would have been losing in itself, in her own heart, which is why it was such a powerful story, because it's exactly what you said. Like in the other episodes, someone came short or they didn't give enough or something went against them. But in this story, there wasn't really anything more she could do. And that was why I felt
not on the internet. Well, not on international scales, but she was the European Championship, wasn't she? And she was the French champion over and over and over and over again. So she did it regionally and sort of like, but just not on the world stage. Yeah.
When she came second, then, do you guys think she was a bad loser then, or not? When she refused to go on the podium,
great question, mate. Because it was my favourite episode, or most impactful, and I think we've pretty much said a number of things, but I just thought, it was a sport of judgment, but judged in more ways than one, and it wasn't like she was a black athlete. New into a football that was predominantly white, and you score a goal, and 99% if you score a goal, it's a goal, right? Yes, there can be at times if it's crossed the line or not, but you're against a panel of judges, aren't you?
Yeah.
And I just thought she was breaking the mold in so many ways, not only because she was a black athlete, not only because she was a world class, she was a world champion at gymnastics and brought that in, which was unique, but then she's been judged. It's not black and white, is it? It's and I just thought that was incredible, and they're putting the finger up and doing the backflip at the end. But great question, Dean, because I was going to come to that, and I felt when she did that, I was so proud of her. I felt really proud that she did that. But we are watching, and we've got hindsight and the gift of time. I wonder how that would have been different watching it at the time.
Yeah, I think
all of the background.
Definitely at the time, I think that would have gone down badly, and I don't think she should have done it personally. I don't think that added anything to her persona, because she could still have done anything what she wanted. And if that's how it was, then that's how it was, and she couldn't do anything about it. And she should have taken the podium. And because all of the people were saying, well, she did all of this, and she shouldn't be marked down like that. Everybody knew, I guess, at the time why she was getting marked down, and she didn't get the gold.
That's the problem. It's subjective, isn't it? It's very subjective, because you've got judges, like you say, if it crosses the line, it's a goal. If it doesn't, it doesn't. The problem is with a program that obviously I don't know ice skating at all. And so I don't know if the narrative is correct that they was leading you to believe that she was the best in the world and she was so far head and shoulders with everybody else. If that was true, then maybe she might have a point doing what she did. But I just can't honestly comment, because I don't know if the narrative is true and the judges was incorrect, or they're spinning it a different way for the program. So I've literally thought about this. I paused it, thought about it, and I kept writing different lines saying, I honestly don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. And I genuinely don't know if she's right or wrong to do it.
Yeah, I'm in the same place. I think if you ask me on a different day of the week, I'll give you a different answer.
Yeah, I mean, we don't get all Trump about it, do we? He didn't like the result.
It was right.
Yeah.
It does come across very unsporting and all that sort of thing. But because I'd followed the episode and I'd really absorbed myself in her story and her passion, I couldn't help feeling for her. I couldn't help feeling like she was literally inside a system which didn't appreciate her. And therefore, there was a part of me that probably wanted to do the same, but maybe wasn't being as brave as her to actually do it. So I kind of was very proud of her as well. But at the same time, was it right? Was it wrong? I think depending what day you ask me, you get a different answer, but I definitely could understand it.
Yeah, there's another great question. What is success? Or another great quote. What is success? Is it in the moment or the longevity? And I was like, oh, that is good. And I don't know.
Well, I think Dean, you bring out something there is the fact that, yeah, we don't know if she deserved to win it on that particular contest, and it came that it was so close, wasn't it, between the two of them? Was it a South Korean athlete and her, and it was so close? And it might have been that it was valid that she just missed out on that. But I think what you're also saying, Dean Grimshawe, there is that it was against the whole concept and the whole figure skating culture, and over time, she was fighting against that, and it was the whole kind of political system within that sport. And I think that's probably what came out in that moment, and why she responded in the way she did. That maybe wasn't, because once you saw her after, and all the microphones were coming up to her, and they were all asking really direct questions about that moment, and I think it's just clicked. She struggled to answer them, and I wonder if the reasons why she struggled was because it wasn't about that moment for her. It was just this overwhelming feeling over time, and I think that's maybe where that was at play, really, because they were focused on that very one moment, whereas I think for her it was just like, right, this is it. I've done as much as I can, and I've had enough. But incredible story, guys. I'm going to jump straight into episode 5. The Lost in the Desert. What I think, right? So where do we start on this one? Because it wasn't like you knew what was coming, right? You knew what was coming. It's like, right, there's this guy who's going with his mates and running in the toughest race in the world in the desert. And wasn't the first day an easy 18 mile. The first day was like an easy 18 mile, and they said, oh, it's quite it's a nice starter. Day 2, 50 odd miles, and you're like, oh shit, and up sand dunes and stuff like that, and then you knew where it was going, right? You knew that he was going to be lost in somewhere, and I mean, where do we like? He ended up he got lost. He was literally tearing the heads off bats and eating bats' innards and drinking his own urine. And he was lost he walked for 9 days without seeing anybody. Ended up, was it Algeria that he ended up?
He turned right and he should have turned left.
Ended up in I'm sure, yeah. I wonder how many people see him and sit and tell him that, you should have turned left and you should have turned right. But I mean, how did that episode, where did that hit with you guys? Because that was tough, right? I mean, it was almost one of those that you couldn't help but put yourself in that position. Like we were talking about figure skating, you could really feel for her, but I couldn't put myself in that position in that sport. But with Mauro, you can't, like for me, I couldn't help but visualize myself in the desert, dehydrated, no hope, and every like little glimmer of hope he had, there'd be a sandstorm, and then there'd be a plane come over and a sandstorm and hit, and they wouldn't see him, and he burnt his sleeping bag and what he had to create smoke, and then another sandstorm hit, and it was just one thing after another. How do you think you would fare in that situation, gentlemen?
Terrible. Can you imagine though? Just picture him. He's walking in the desert. He's lost. He's tired. He's absolutely done in, and the crows started to follow you. I mean, that just symbolizes death, doesn't it? You straight away you're thinking, oh no, I'm in trouble here. I think it's absolutely petrifying. The only saving grace for me was that during this whole story, he was narrating it. So I was okay because I knew he was going to be all right.
I mean, let's face it. I've got a mate who did the Marathon des Sables, and it is the hardest one. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And you've got to be a special type of person to even contemplate taking it on. But that story there, I mean, he stood 1% chance of surviving that. I mean, let's be clear about it. He should not have survived it. I mean, dehydrated in the desert. What did he lose? 30 pounds?
Yeah, 30 pounds.
I mean, he shouldn't have survived. Because he was an athlete, maybe that's why he did. But the chance of getting found, the chances of surviving, everything was against him.
Well, let's not forget he slit his wrist.
And he tried to end it. Yeah.
And he woke up and
his chances of surviving were nil. Were virtually nil. I mean, I say 1 in 1%, and probably less than that, in all honesty.
Well, his point was he didn't want to suffer. It wasn't at that point that he was going to die. It was that he didn't want to suffer.
Man is not afraid of dying. Man is afraid of suffering. That was his quote. Yeah. I loved it.
Yeah. I think he'd realised he'd made peace with himself, to be honest, and that was that. He didn't panic. I think he panicked to start off with, but then he stopped panicking, didn't he? I think the strangest thing is he comes back and then he just can't get enough of it. He just went back and did it again and again and again, and you think there's something wrong with that guy.
Well, that was the thing. He ran it 6 more times, never finishing higher than 12.
Yeah.
And his wife called it being married to Indiana Jones, who always seemed adventure away from. It was be married to Indiana Jones, who always seeked adventure away from their life, whereas she described life to her as the adventure, and they were so different.
So you're two different worlds.
Two different worlds, and of course they then got divorced. And but despite being divorced, I found it very interesting that she was there talking about their journey and their story, as was he. And based on like that, I found it curious because when it started was their relationship as a family dynamic. Did he have 2 or 3 kids? 2 or 3 kids.
3 kids.
3 kids, and they were talking about how he was selfish, and even he said that was a selfish act, and that he for him to go and run that race. And even though he had all of those problems, he was then addicted, as you said, and he came back. And what was your guys' thoughts on that kind of the family dynamics and him being selfish and needing to go and do that, and then the breakdown of his family setup as a result?
Well, I found his episode the hardest to relate to because I'm quite a big family person, and I couldn't just turn my back on my family to sort of follow that kind of thing. Like we've all got our dreams and things, but so I couldn't relate to that. And also, like you was talking about how treacherous it was but I never kind of got any of that emotion from the episode. He was very matter of fact about it. It's like, on day 3 I nearly died. On day 4 I thought I was going to die, and I didn't get any real emotion from it. Like I didn't at any point get any despair from the story. If I was to read the story in a book, I think my own mindset would create more emotion. Like, whoa, that is really scary. That is horrendous. But as he was kind of explaining it, it was almost like robotic. And it's like, yeah, it weren't too bad. I had another go at it next year. I was like, have I missed an episode? What do you mean you had another go at this next year? Like, so I really struggled to relate to it in any way, shape, or form. Like it was a bit devoid of emotion for me.
I personally thought he was an incredibly selfish person. I just put a note about being married. When you've got kids, it's about give and take. And sometimes your needs and your desires and wants and dreams, they aren't first and foremost anymore. It's your kids that's the most important thing. And so for him just to pack up and leave, I find that interesting. I think I put he's an interesting guy because I'm like Dean, that I always put my family first no matter what. And so I couldn't ever just take off. I don't even like going away to a conference for 2 days because I miss my kids. So I just couldn't do that for my personal gratification and my personal goals. And I get that we all need a little bit of alone time, me time. I get all that, but he just struck me as somebody. It was a square peg in a round hole for being married. It wasn't right for him and his mindset and how he thinks about the world and life and goals and ambitions. And so for me, yeah, I actually thought he was quite selfish.
Mm-hmm. Very selfish, yeah.
Well, we go to episode 2, and this is the one we've all got. Before we press the record button, we all had a few opinions on this, and it's the jaws of victory, and on the verge of relegation and perhaps extinction. English football club Torquay United get a final chance at survival thanks to a police dog. Yeah, so the police dog, well, a hero and almost a villain. The police dog Bryn bite that required 17 stitches, and anyone that hasn't seen the episode will be like, "What on earth is that about?" But yeah, interesting one. What did we make of this? Because it's a very different episode out of the episode.
Yeah, I don't think it. If you watch them in order and you watch the boxing first, and you get a sense of what the series is about, and then you watch the second one, you think, "Oh, I'm confused now. I don't see how these all attach together." And I've been thinking about. I think the mistake they made in the Torquay one is it should actually be about Lincoln. Because I think it was Lincoln that ended up finishing bottom that season. And so Lincoln was safe. And then by some dramatic series of events, Torquay won against the odds and knocked them out of the league. And I think if they'd framed it that way round, it would follow the narrative of the rest of the series closer, because you would be looking at someone like Jean Van de Velde, someone who's safe, home and dry, and then some freak events take place, and then it's seen as a defeat. And I think if you look at it that way, you can see how it then fits in with the rest of the season of shows.
I hadn't thought of it that way, but now you put it that way, Phil, I probably would have to agree, because when they're talking through the season, it just seemed abysmal. It just seemed awful. Like, having run a Sunday league team, it just made me think about getting up on a Sunday morning and getting a pub team together. That's how it kind of felt. And then at the end of it, they got a lucky goal in the 11th hour, and it all worked out okay in the end. And it was like, it didn't. It wasn't. I didn't have the same sort of drama from the other series.
No, I mean, you imagine being a Lincoln City fan at 88 minutes, 90 minutes on the Saturday afternoon. You're listening to the radio, and you're still playing in the same division next season, and your match is finished, and you're all having a pint, but there's still 4 minutes left down at Torquay. I mean, that's a proper crush, that, isn't it?
Been there, done it. So I mean, obviously, being a Hull City fan, I've basically suffered like this for 40 years. And it's the same. It's funny enough, because they were talking as though it's like the biggest victory ever, and sometimes it feels like that when you're down the bottom of the table. Hull City were like 8-9 points adrift at the bottom of the League Two, the 4th division, and we were about to go out of the division, unheard of. And then it was the Great Escape, and just like a 0-0 felt like a 10-0 victory. It was the weirdest sensation. But I totally agree. I mean, it was the one story that just didn't fit. And then, of course, the comedy value of the police dog biting the striker was just hilarious.
Yeah.
And made it out that the police dog saved the club and things like that. So it was all a big spin, really, wasn't it, at the end of the day? But it was very entertaining.
Yeah, that's what I put down. I put the players are just all nuts. I thought, especially the goalkeeper, he's absolutely mad. Enjoyable story, but I didn't get anything out of it. My biggest takeaway was the policeman who owned the dog. Them two actually retired together. They went on long walks together, and when the dog was ill and died, he's still got his ashes in the house. And I actually got choked up by that. I thought, there's my biggest takeaway. There's my story.
Yeah. The scene with the minibus traveling like 200 odd miles up the country and all the legs sticking out of it.
Yeah, you just can't make it. I think that actually the story, the one part of the story that qualified them to go into it is that Torquay have always been this club that has been staring the abyss for forever. You know, it's never actually climbed anywhere, never done anything. It's always gone from lurched from disaster to disaster to disaster. So it's never done anything. I think that was probably why it was picked.
Yeah,
good point.
Yes, certainly for like more entertainment value for sure. But I wonder how, as we've identified that, I wonder how that works well within the series of 8 to strengthen other episodes, you know, to be more emotionally invested. Because I wonder if we had an American guest looking at the Torquay United story, that you know, that they're not used to majority of information. I mean, even when there was the diagram of, and he was explaining about if you're the bottom ones you get relegated, and if you're the top you get promoted, and all of that. And as soon as he was doing that, I was thinking that's for the American market. That's so I wonder what an American's point of view would be on the Torquay United a story. And don't forget, you know, there's been a recent story about Wrexham being taken over by Ryan Reynolds and his Hollywood friend. They've been bought over. So it's kind of, I wonder now it's maybe a good timing with that in the press and the news over in America. Because you look at that and you can almost smell the kind of Sunday football, that lower league football, and the hard surface and the dust and the non-attractive football. I mean, I'm a Middlesbrough fan, and I was watching them, you know, in the Ayresome Park days as a young lad. In 1986, they nearly went bankrupt and had to play at Hartlepool. And 10 years later, we had Brian Robson managing in a new stadium with world-class players. And so, yeah, I could resonate with a number of things. It did kind of bring back some memories there. But if you don't have that association with it, I wonder from an outsider's point of view, because it was...
James, just to jump in there, because actually this actually does tie into something that you mentioned before about you learn more, you sort of like have more enjoyment about stopping the loss. You know, you learn more about yourself, definitely, when you have a loss than you do when you have a win. You don't learn anything about yourself when you have a win. You know, it's just a win. But when you're losing, and actually you turn that loss into something which is positive, that is a greater victory than winning something that you expect to win, if you see what I mean. So, and that's football all over. And maybe the Americans would get that, because it's when you're supporting a team, and you know, if you support Liverpool or Man United and they're expected to win all the time at the top of the league, it's way more fun supporting someone who's just like struggling to get a victory, haven't scored for 7. I remember supporting Hull City. They didn't score for 7 games at home, not one goal. And when they scored, the crowd went ballistic. Yeah, so it's that type of thing, isn't it?
It did remind me of when we watched the playbook. Was it Jill Ellis, the women's USA soccer coach?
USA soccer coach, yeah.
Yeah, and do you remember her saying that because they were the best and they'd won, it was either the World Cup or the World, and they were at the top, and she said, you know, it's short space, it's borrowed time, because then you know you've got to reset, and she said it's almost easier aiming for the people on the top, because that's you can really visualize that and head towards that. But when you're at the top, it's forward space and it's a limited time only. And that certainly reminded me of that when we watched. But yeah, Torquay United, and we can all resonate with Sunday League football. But just what you say now, I'm going to, because I was going to go to episode 7 and we'll come back to that. But Jonathan, based on what you were saying there, is that, and I can resonate with golf. I know I've played golf with a number of people who are great golfers. And it always seems, no matter what level you're at golf, and I know you play golf, Jonathan, and I'm not sure where the other guys sit on the golfing spectrum. Whether you play or not, I'm sure we can all agree it's frustrating. If you've picked up a club once, it's probably as frustrating as picking up a club 1,000 times. But I play golf, and it seems everyone wants to be always at a different level when they play golf. And I quite enjoy that I can play a bit, and I'm quite happy that I can either be great or not, and I'll just enjoy the process. Where I know people who go around and play on par, and they find it boring. And I'm watching them, and they're hitting awesome shots, and they're not happy. They're absolutely not. They're never happy.
Mates like that.
They're not happy. And you're like, what are you doing here? And it's always it's funny because with sport, whether it's a team or an individual sport, I always love that battle with yourself. Your own standards, and I think that applies certainly with myself and business. If you've got your own high standards that you're driving towards, it's almost irrelevant of what anybody expects of you, either above or below, because you're just so driven on your own standards and your own inner battle.
But how good does it feel when you time those sails perfectly, and the ball goes straight through? I've only got crazy golf as any sort of reference point here. I don't think I've ever played a proper round of golf in my life.
You would have it. Do you know what? It's one of them things. If you won the Euro Millions and you had 80 million in the bank and you got a big house, swimming pool. It would be in which order? Would it be swimming pool first, or like the best crazy golf course you could ever imagine? It would be a close call. It'd just be like, I'll build them both at the same time so I can have a go at both of them. But
yeah. I mean, just quickly, but going as we're talking about golf, can we just talk about Jean Van de Velde?
Absolutely, that was the segue in. We got carried away, didn't we?
And I know sort of a bit of the background of the story of that. I mean, he played an immaculate three rounds, and his last round was also immaculate. And he'd been aggressive all the time. He'd been playing with the driver, whereas the others have been a bit more cautious. So, I mean, so he'd been playing with the driver all the time and been working for him. So why he gets to the 18th, why wouldn't it work for him then? So to actually would have been totally wrong for him to play cautiously and to take out, say, a 7-iron or a 5-iron just to make sure it got on the fairway, because there was no guarantee that would have happened anyway. And he'd been playing well with his driver all the time. And just these things happen, he's just in a slight adrenaline rush, slight mistiming, and he smashes out to the right, but he's still got an opportunity to get on the green. And actually the shot, he would have played that shot probably 95% of the time and got on the green. Just this one time he didn't, and he went into some deep grass. So everything that could go wrong on that particular hole just went wrong, and it's just unfortunate. So I don't think he actually did anything wrong. And I think he admits that, doesn't he? He replays it and say, well, actually, these things happen, shit happens. It's not a case of me making bad choices or doing something wrong. I don't think he could have done anything else, in all honesty. So
I thought the way he handled it in the moment of defeat was incredible. When he was being interviewed, literally straight afterwards, and he was like, "Can I go play that again?" It's just
exactly. I mean, so 9 times out of 10, 95%, 95 times out of 100, that just wouldn't have happened. It was just one of those things in golf, and the best golfers, they play the shot and that's it, finished. They move on to the next shot. You can't control what has happened. It's rear view mirror stuff. It's happened. We just move on and take that shot one stage at a time. And it just so happened it was a disaster. That could have happened in any of the holes of the 72 holes he's played.
Don't you think he did incredibly well to hold that putt, though, that 10-foot putt to go into a playoff?
Incredible. But I think by that time his adrenaline had absolutely just gone, hadn't he? It would just be exhausted at that stage. But you're right, Dean. Actually, I'd forgotten about that, because absolutely the nerves of steel to do that.
Yeah. Also, do you reckon that loss and in the way, in the circumstance it happened, do you think that had an impact on the rest of his career? Never winning the major, never getting close, ever after that?
I think personally, he wasn't the greatest golfer, and I think it's just that he just turned up at the Open Championship and just did everything right. Like there's been lots of occasions where golfers have done that and they've won, and they've never won another major or never appeared again. It was just sometimes there's something about the Open Championship that just occasionally lets a player in to do that sort of thing. I don't think that affected his career. No.
I did take a look, just a bit of insight here. I did a bit of research, and he is His current net worth is $4 million. So he's not done too bad out of things.
But Rory wins that in one tournament.
Yeah, there is that, isn't it? But Rory still won't be. Like I said, I'm sure Rory he's at such a high level. He's still not happy. He'll be wanting to do that little bit more constantly. And I found out with golf. And what did he pick up? I took a look. He picked up $305,000 for his second place in that tournament. So, which is interesting because you can look at that and go, yeah, but he still picked up $305,000. And if you're not a sportsman, that's pretty easy to look at. But if you are, it's almost irrelevant of that amount of money because that money's come and gone, whereas that memory's still always there. And you guys touch on, if he'd have played that safely and failed as he did, and not won as he did, how difficult would that be to deal with long term? The fact that he should have, if it had changed his play and played safe and it hadn't worked out. I mean, imagine trying to live with that. You'd be like, why did I change?
Exactly, but that's the whole point, isn't it? Because if he'd played safe for the other 71 holes that he'd already played, he wouldn't have been in that position. It's because
absolutely.
He took it on and played aggressively that he put himself in the position of being 3 shots ahead of everybody else going down the 18th, and it was just unfortunate that his drive was way right and he just landed in the deep rough and went in the water. And I mean, he got in the water, didn't he? He rolled his shoes, took his shoes and socks off, and was going to play it out the water. I mean, that if he'd done that, I'd have punched him myself because that was stupid. But then he had to take it out the water and drop it back in the rough, So it was all really just bad luck.
Even to the point where the guy who was playing the same round at the same time, to do him a favour, says, "I'll get out your way." And he goes and holes it from the bunker, doesn't he? Does exactly what John says. How much pressure do you want to put on?
Yeah, quite. And then the guy said, it could be worse. You could wait, the tide will go out.
That was a photograph with his where he had a big smile on his face, looking at what a lovely photograph that was under those circumstances.
But to finish as he did, and he's still, everybody knows him, everybody talks about that, and he's come out a bigger man and doing all the coaching, and he's found his calling, hasn't he? And probably because of that is probably a happier man. I mean, I don't know him, but I suspect because he looked like that at the end, didn't he? And the fact that he could actually go on to this program called Losers and just talk about that.
Yeah, here's a question.
Experience.
Here's a question for you guys then. So you talked about Rory and you're saying that, he's at that stage now, but he still ain't going to be happy. And so that's something that I've always been struggling with, being content, the feeling of being content. I look at other people and when they're content, I kind of look at them with a little bit of jealousy sometimes because I think, do you know what? I don't think I'll ever be content, but I love the fact I'm never content because that gives me drive in the morning. It gives me, I want to get up early. I want to get stuff done because I want to get to the next goal and next goal and next goal. But I look at other people and I just think, it must be quite a blissful feeling to actually have that feeling of contentment. And I wonder how you guys feel. Do you guys ever get feeling of content?
I'd love to go on this one if that's because I know I had a light bulb moment on this years ago, and one of my favorite things. Not one of my favorite thing in the world is traveling and meeting people around the world and being in different cultures and experiences. And I was on a big round the world trip in 2006, and it was that trip that there was a moment, and I realized that I was experiencing something. I can't remember the exact moment I was in, but I was experiencing something.
Was it LSD, James?
It was probably one of many LSD. No, not quite.
We're trying to brush past this. Just
I found myself in a moment that I realised was one of those moments that I was guaranteed to look back on, wishing I was there, and I realised I was in it at that moment in time. And it was a light bulb moment because what I from that moment on, I made a point of trying to realize those moments. Yeah. And once I realized those moments in life, if I'm on a boat, like swam with 200 dolphins in New Zealand, like 200 to 300 wild dolphins in New Zealand, and you don't let that pass you by, and you can't, so you like try and be in that moment and mindful because you are going to look back for the rest of your life with a smile and wish you were back there, or that knowing how impactful it was. So I'm a firm believer, if you can identify those moments at the time, for me, it changes things completely, because everything then around you, the smells, the tastes, you're not trying to think about anything else, because you realize you're in that moment. And I think that's really key, because we can all be guilty in life, in business, of letting those moments pass us by. And you get home and someone says, "Oh, how was that? How was football? Or how was it when you met up with your mate for a coffee?" And it isn't until that moment that you realize how good it was. And I think it's such a shame, and we're all guilty of it. But I think we can all play a part in allowing ourselves to have less of those moments pass us by being present in those moments in life and business, or whatever it is. And again, you guys with families, I'm sure you can probably vouch more than me in those, as they're rare and valuable times. So that's my take on that, is that awareness. And we can be always too busy, but if you're able to grab hold of that and realize it for what it is looking forward, I mean, that was a game changer for me. So
yeah, I think there's something in this, isn't there? Like linking it back to the TV show, it's the transition from something negative to something positive. And so if you're in a job and then you go traveling around the world, and then you've got this negative to positive transition, but you've got to look at the amount of time as well between the two emotions. I mean, this show, these are people reflecting back 20, 30 years, and they've got the benefit of time to be able to frame it to the point where they can go on an international TV show and put a positive spin on it. If you get someone doing these sorts of moments this season in football, or last season in American football, or whatever, you aren't going to get them talking about it, most likely, like right now. So going back to what Dean says about contentment, if you've got multiple positive moments and you haven't got a negative reference point, then you are probably going to naturally become almost complacent, because you haven't got the other reference point to give you the contentment. And then when you play it out over time, as James says, if you can get that so that you can actually reference that in the moment, the shortest possible space of time, then you've won, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's a hell of a skill. I know.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, none of us are psychiatrists, and I guess if we did have a psychiatrist, it would take years to unpick us all, on this panel in particular. But I think from my perspective, I mean, great comments from Dean and James. But I think I try and enjoy the journey. We're going from A to B, wherever that B is, or whatever the A was. You've just got to enjoy the journey. And as Phil says, it's absolutely right. Sometimes you've got to experience pain to realize what it's like to not feel pain. You know what I mean? So that's my deepness for the day.
You're on the journey a lot longer than you are on the actual standing there achieving the goal. So I feel like you've got to enjoy the journey, otherwise you're not going to enjoy life. It's going to pass you by. Right. And so the journey always, and the process takes a lot longer than the goal itself when you stood there for a minute looking back at what you achieved. So I think it's paramount to really appreciate the moments. Looking from a personal point of view, looking back from when I had that Lazo restaurant, it was 18 months of hell. It really was the worst time of my life. I thought the world was against me. I loved being in my bed at nighttime because nobody could get me. There's nobody who could ring up for an invoice or anything. And I felt protected. As soon as the alarm clock went off, it was like, oh no, here we go again. But looking back, I learned so much about myself. I wanted to be on this panel. There's absolutely no chance I'd be here right now if it wasn't for that journey. And so good and bad things happens to us every single day of the week. But the problem is, we don't know which is which. So we don't know, a bad thing could be ultimately a good thing, and a good thing could ultimately be a bad thing. And so as long as we're mindful of that, every single time we have a setback, just think it could be the best thing that's ever happened to us.
Yeah, I mean, that Ali, moving on to the episode about Aliy Zirkle, I think that's very poignant, because she was lost, wasn't she, when she was they'd moved around in America, and then she saw this advert for Alaska, and he thought,
why study in downtown Philly when you could be studying in Alaska?
And she went to Alaska, and that was it, and her life took off. I mean, she had hundreds of dogs, just a few more than you've got, James, but you can always catch up if you want to. So I'm just moving out the light, and It's like the light has been shining through here. But I thought it was really interesting how she dedicated her life to that, and she took on the toughest challenge. Not expected as a female, no one expected to do well but the actual moral of that story wasn't anything about the dog sledding as such, was it really? It was about that episode where literally someone tried to murder her, which was
that
really
came out of that well, like the murderer himself, literally came out of nowhere. You just wasn't expecting that at all. You thought that one of her, that she was going to fall off the side of that cliff, or it was kind of leading towards that, and then the guy on the skidoo came out of nowhere and tried to murder her, and then
that was very odd, that wasn't it? And then I guess the story unfolded where she got the confidence back to do it again, and I guess that was her nirvana, and she understood herself more because she had stared death in the face, which is probably go back on what I said earlier. You've got to feel pain to realize what it's not like to feel pain.
Sorry, I didn't mean to butt in then. I was going to find a lot of similarities between Aliy and the Mauro with the Marathon des Sables guys, because when I was following those two stories, I almost found that the actual event was inconsequential. It's almost like they were looking for something, and the event itself was just part of their own inner journey, if that makes sense. Because they both seem to really go for a lot of solitude. I know Aliy had a real close connection with her dogs, but she didn't seem to have very close connections with people. I know she was married, but you didn't see much of her husband in the show or the conversation. And there was definitely that thing with Mauro, like the Marathon des Sables. How lonely can you get? Like, not just geographically, but in your own head, like you're just completely on your own. And I found there was a massive crossover between those two, where they were kind of looking for something, and the result wasn't really a matter to them. The whole winning and losing thing per se, but they were so absorbed in it and so committed to that path that there was something going on there. And it's almost like another show. I was trying to work it in my head. Well, what is it they're chasing? What is it they're after? And I couldn't work that out in my own head.
Well, they probably can't themselves, can they?
That's why they keep doing it.
Yeah, that's why they keep doing it. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought those two episodes together, because my question, I was putting a question to all of you guys, was you've got a year to train. Do you choose the dog musher route, or do you hit the Moroccan run, the desert run? What would you choose, and why? Isn't that a bit of a mindfuck? Because I was thinking of that question, and I was just like, Jesus. Well, I think I'd do that one, but and then I'm flipping between the two. Which one would you? A year to train, and then you've got to choose one of them.
Marathon des Sables. I don't like the cold.
Interesting. That's it. Just don't like the cold. I'll do that one. Then I have to crack on.
Can I not take curling? Can I not try and learn curling?
Yeah, but Phil, we've got clear that you can't pull in it anymore. So you haven't got the sex appeal. You can't have any booze or cigarettes, and you've got to be a properly trained athlete. The beer bellies, the dad bods aren't allowed. So
yeah, I'll take the marathon.
Yeah. Well, Deans, what about you two guys? What would you head towards, do you think?
What a choice that is! That is absolutely horrendous. I don't like the cold either, so I don't even like it outside now. So I'd probably do the marathon.
Oh wow! I did actually consider the Marathon des Sables once, but I was a lot lighter then and a lot younger, more hair. But now looking back on it, I'd do the Alaska trip, because as much as I don't like the cold, like having done lots of trekking, 3 peaks and the TA courses, it's like when you're cold you can warm up, but when you are hot you can't just cool down. So I think given the choice, I'd start cold and warm up.
Interesting. I mean, can you imagine where your mind would be at points in those two events? That's just beyond where you've ever been, in ways that you wouldn't want to be thinking and feeling.
What about you, James?
I hate the cold, hence living in a warm country. I think because you've got the sled, you can't get away from the fact that you're on a sledge pulled by a load of dogs. I mean, that just sounds amazing to me. But you're not going on a holiday to see Santa Claus in Greenland, are you? It's a very different prospect. So naturally, going, that'd be real fun. And then you look when she came in and you looked at her, and she's hardcore clearly and used to it. And when a point and you saw her face and it was all frozen up and stuff, and you're like, no way would I want to entertain that. And the storm that came in. So then you go, actually, I'd probably be vid to that. But yeah, I think I'm good with the heat. I can't get enough of it. So although it'd be horrible, but then you've got the sand dunes. I remember I did sandboarding in Morocco, and because I was in pretty decent nick, I was pretty fit. So I'd go get the surfboard thing up for some of the ladies and do the gentlemanly thing. Once you'd done it 2 or 3 times up small dunes, your like legs are on fire. So I was watching that, just thinking, how on earth do they do that? It's just like, so I'd have to go for, same temperature wise. I'd probably do the desert, but I'd be wanting to kill myself on every other second. Just like, I don't even want to put myself there and think about it too much. Just that I've run 10Ks and half marathons in nice conditions, and the thoughts that have gone through my head aren't worth sharing. So yeah, that would be horrible. But I'm curious, guys. We've covered a load of stuff with the series, and we've delved into some personal elements with that. What when it comes to some, and if that's either personally or professionally, so in business, in sport, in life, have you guys got any examples? I mean, I'm even curious with this. What still sticks from school? Is there anything from school that that you might have done and not quite won, or that it drove you through and still drives you in adult life, or but likewise, any examples in business and personal life as an adult? Are there any, when you're watching this, or you knew we were coming on today's show as a collective, was there anything that you looked back on that stood out from a personal experience?
Yeah, so I suppose I'll take this one then, because there's a lot about Jack Ryan, Black Jack, that I can relate to, because I certainly have got that in me, where I didn't like authority. I didn't like people telling me what to do. I was more of a street footballer in terms of with a tennis ball and a small ball. And as soon as you put me in that role and position where I had to deal with referees, coaches, tactics, I was never ever as good. And do you know what? I can almost see my son in him a lot, in terms of the talent he's got, where he's having a kick around with his friends, he stands out. But then when you put him in an environment where he's got rules, he's got a referee, he's got the coach, he's got to stick in a position, then it's almost everything's drained out of him. All his natural ability is gone. And he fits in normally, but he doesn't in any way, shape or form stand out. And so I personally can see a lot of myself in Jack Ryan. I remember when I broke up with an ex-girlfriend who was engaged, and I used to go out all the time. I was literally Jack Ryan for a little bit. And so I can relate to him quite a lot, but I luckily got out of that spiral before it went too far. But in terms of sport, in terms of his actions, I could certainly see a lot of myself in him. And I don't like admitting it, but yeah, truth be told, I can see a lot of what he did as what I was like as well.
Wait, I'm curious, Dean, because you've got that insight now, which is incredible from where you were at, and you see that with your son. What's your thoughts on managing that, or making sure that he gets the best out of himself and doesn't struggle maybe in the same ways that you did with your support and insight? Have you thought about that? How are you managing that?
Yeah, massively. I thought about that loads. Yeah, and for me, it's all about encouragement and making sure he enjoys it. And I've listened to what Jamie Carragher said about when his dad, I mean, I listened to all the sporting greats of what the dad was like and how the dad was with them. And that's just not in me. I can't be the tough love like that, where Jamie Carragher said that his dad, some days he was crying because it was so cold and wet and miserable. And he used to make him wear short sleeves, T-shirts and go out there. And, he would never give him any love or anything about the match. In fact, he would never say anything kind. What he did, he would only highlight the negative things that he did. And so many footballers have been in that position. And so for me, I just want to make sure that there's no pressure. It's enjoyment. I don't expect anything of him. And I just keep saying I love you. And I'm very proud of you, not for your achievements, but who you are, because your achievements, I don't want him to relate his achievements with my love, because for me, it's all about him being a great person, a nice person. And so it's an enjoyment, making sure that he knows that he's loved, respected, no matter what he does. But it's a very, very hard. I don't think anybody's going to get it right. And I can't remember a podcast I was listening to. Somebody said that it doesn't matter what you do or how educated you are. In some way, shape or form, you are going to negatively impact your kids, and there's nothing you can do. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. Bloody hell, no chance. But I think there's an element of truth to it.
I love that. That's amazing insight. It's almost like damage limitation, isn't it? That you're not always going to get it right, and maybe more often than not, and you hear about periods of children's lives where parents just get everything wrong because of the child, because they're going through this phase of finding out who they are and what they want to do. But that was amazing. I'm so pleased I asked that question based on your previous answer, because that's really inspiring, Dean. Really,
yeah.
Really
just on that, Dean. It was so with Oakley being 6 years old, sort of similar with your boys. They usually stop playing football November, December, January, and start again, so they miss the coldest part of the year because of their age. Obviously, going through a lockdown, the season's been messed up, so they're actually playing in December. And so just before Christmas, on Sunday morning, we were up at the pitch, which is high up, open field, and it started to rain, and then the wind picked up, and there were these little 6-year-olds on the pitch, and one by one, you saw each one of them break, and like what you've just said, if Jamie Carragher was one of those lads and his dad was there, obviously he would have reacted in a particular way. And you could see each one of us parents, we all responded differently according to like who we are and how we sort of like see parenting. Like, some kids were just getting, right, you don't need to play. Some kids were like, right, no, you're back on, you're playing. And someone was like, come on, we can do this. Let's do a little bit more, then take it a little bit. And everyone did respond differently. And you don't know who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah.
You don't know how it's going to play out. You just got to sort of like go with what you believe at that time. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
The best way I deal with that is now my Zach comes up to me when it's raining in the morning and goes, Dad, it's raining. And he's really, really happy when it's raining on a Sunday, because I tell him that's where you've got the advantage. That's where I had an advantage in Sunday League football, because when it was raining, wet, cold, miserable, soggy pitch, that's where I knew that I had the beating of everybody else, because I used to roll my sleeves up and I wanted it more. And I said to him, that's our advantage. That's our competitive advantage, because you know that everybody else will be feeling like you feel, but you've got an advantage because you know that. And so when it's raining, you can use that to your advantage, knowing full well that every other person on that pitch doesn't want to be there, is feeling cold, isn't going to be as aggressive to want the ball, isn't going to try as hard. And it's your opportunity. If you just try just that little bit more than the next person, or just even if you just don't try any harder than normal, just try give your normal effort, you will be head and shoulders above every single person on that pitch. And it's really good that switch of mindset, because now when it's raining on a Sunday morning, he actually comes down to me and says, Dad, it's raining. And I just that one thing has changed the way he processes the fact it's wet and cold out there.
I've written that down. I'm having that. Yeah. Mic drop. Brilliant, mate.
Love that. Has anybody got any other examples from either from childhood or as an adult, personally, professionally?
I used to play a lot of rugby at school, and we were sort of like out of the group that we played with, the other teams, we were second best always to this one team, and it carried on through the years, because obviously they grew up through the years, and we followed in the same year. And then just one chance in this sevens competition, we got them to the final. And there was like 30 seconds to go, and we equalised. So it was 8-8, and we had to take a kick to convert, and we would have won the match. And out of the 7 of us, none of us were kickers. So the prop forward, I remember it, like said, "Oh, fuck it, I'm going to take it. Sorry for the swearing." And he just got it, and he just booted it over the bar, and we won. And the whole school was watching. And it's the only time that this team ever lost in 5 years. And the feeling was quite amazing. And I'd never forget that.
Love that. Dean Grimshawe?
Yeah, and hearing you guys talking about your boys, like my biggest regret was always, I used to play a lot of football as a teenager, and we had quite a good little team and we won a lot of trophies. And I had that relationship with my dad. My dad loved me very much, so it certainly wasn't like the Michael Bentt story, but he was always, it dissect the game in the evenings. So you play for an hour and then dissect it for 10 hours. And it used to really it used to bring me to tears, to the point that I think when I got to about 15 or 16, I just stopped playing.
Right.
And I think that's why I really loved the Surya story, because she had the strength to carry on going. And there was a bit in me, and I was watching it thinking, at the time I didn't have the strength to carry on going. I really wanted to. Every week I'd miss the game. I'd be sad that I weren't playing, but I just couldn't put up with going through it. And now it makes me think a lot more about like my children. Like my dad was trying to do the best for me because he thought that was what motivated me. He thought, you know, if I spur you on here, if I pick out your weaknesses, you'll improve. You get the desire. And he wanted all the right things, but he did it in a way that I ended up just stopping. And I went into rugby, and he came to my first rugby match, didn't understand the rules, and never came to a second. And I thought, right, that's it. Rugby's now my game, you know. And at that point, I had all the angst of, you know, teenage angst, and it was like a channel for my aggression, if you know what I mean. But I always really missed playing football, which, you know, I'm not going to tell you that I would have been like Ballon d'Or or anything like that, because that probably wouldn't be true. But I was a good little player, you know, and I was doing these things. And it took me a lot of time through my 20s to sort of rebuild that courage and find out who I am, which is where I got into the coaching. And, you know, I got back to sort of where I am today. And then I look back on it a lot differently now. But that's where I sort of, I saw a lot of power in Surya. You know, she was that strong. With all that resistance and all that was against her, she didn't stop playing. She didn't stop doing the thing that she loved, which was the mistake that I did. And, you know, and I definitely look back on it very differently now when I've got children and they're growing up and I'm looking at sort of them coming through.
She was super. There was a reason why she was at the top of her game. And yes, she had the ability. But she was clearly strong, wasn't she? And even like a mother. It was an interesting relationship with her. You spoke about parenting here, either you guys been parents or being parented or a bit of both, and her mother was interesting in her episode, wasn't she? You kind of wondered how much of a benefit
in itself, really.
Yeah, that was interesting. That was an interesting dynamic there, and the relationship that then her mum with the coaches was at play. But
it makes me think of the point that Dean made, you know, like, I don't know figure skating enough to know if she really did deserve to win that time. I don't know if the performance was really there, but you do have to question, well, if she'd have kept with a proper coach or a professional coach or someone who really understood the sport, would they have worked with her more and basically given her the opportunity to be more successful by, you know, like showing her the right way? Maybe we don't know, like we're surmising here, but maybe her mother was a big part of, you know, you keep doing it your way and stick two fingers up to the establishment. Like maybe that was a factor in it. I don't know.
Yeah, don't know.
Phil?
Well, it was just on that. It was interesting how her mum changed as well, wasn't it? Because she started off being very carefree, traveling around Europe. Ends up in India. So has one outlook on life and presumably on parenting and things, and knew that she wanted to adopt. And then 15 years later and onwards, there was a big change in her as a person. It looked so. I wonder where that came from and how that played out. But I agree. I think if coaches had been more involved, then maybe the establishment would have been more welcoming as well. So.
Yeah, there's so many dynamics in that episode, wasn't there? So many dynamics at play. And it was great on her episode, what she's doing now, you know, traveling the world and being an inspiration and being a coach. And it ended up, it was funny because we've essentially got 2 episodes that ended up in Harlem with positive stories in Harlem, which that was really a really nice ending to that. And you could see the impact that she had on that group of young women in Harlem there. But Phil, what's your personal input in terms of any kind of trials and tribulations, any stories of losses?
I think the one that jumps to mind in as we're discussing it is when I was first building what was Mainframe. It changed its name and everything now, but when we first set up the company and started growing it, we got to about 5 people, which was a decent size. We're a decent size office in our industry. And within the space of about 6 weeks, we lost the manager and the 2 seniors, and the manager poached one of the seniors, which left me with an apprentice. And that obviously, that meant that we had less than 40% of our capacity within 6 weeks. And I think I was very angry and bitter, and really felt that, and I felt like I'd really lost out. But it was 2007, it was right at the end of 2007, and then in 2008, obviously we hit the recession, we hit the crisis, and what had happened there is, in order to still achieve like our 100% order book, because we were super busy, but with only 40% of the capacity, we'd found a way of working which was, it was streamlined, it was automated, there was perfect harmony between me and Al, who was the apprentice coming up. And so we were able to achieve 2 or 3 times what we previously were doing as 2 people. And we sailed through the recession and came out the other side in just such a really good structure and such a really good place. And I think that swing for it, it's like Dean said, you know, good things and bad things happen to us, but at the time we don't know which label to give something. And at the time, I mean, I was really angry with the people that left, you know, quite childishly. And I was angry with the situation, and I really felt like we were suffering. But now, and it's taken a while, obviously, I can look back and frame that as such a positive thing to happen, to me, to Al, to the business, and how we then move forward. So yeah, that sort of jumps out at me. I've always been rubbish at football. I haven't got any good or bad stories at football. I don't think coaching or parenting will make any difference to me. How about you, James?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a solo story that sprung up, and a team. And I'll quick on the solo one was, I was always the second best at 400 meters in my secondary school, and the problem was it was always a different person that beat me every year on sports day. And the first year, I probably my best chance of winning it. And I'm not going to be too graphic here, but there's a bit of a fun story. Let's say after that race, in any sporting activity, I then wore cycling shorts, because it was a little, my first curve, I was a little bit distracted, because you know the old boxer shorts your mum used to buy you that we weren't really, you know, so that kind of was at fault for my first loss, like being distracted. And then I always seemed to lose out, coming second place by different people. So never won that, but then it was on the sports day that we were our form were lacking a long jumper, and I was just like, I think I was able to do it, and I ended up winning it and getting the best thing in the results. So I ended up going on stage for a long jump, being the best at long jump randomly, when every year I was like training for the 400 meters and getting beaten by someone different. But the team one, the one that stood out was Beverley, so the town I'm from, used to have a 5-a-side football tournament every summer, 40 plus teams, and I used to play for a city team. So even though I was a town boy, I used to go and play for a team in the city. And so when this tournament came up, I'd always find myself being drafted into other teams that were like makeshift or weren't, you know, were all right but weren't so good, didn't click. And so there was always these really great teams, and I just wanted to win it so bad, in my town playing football. And then I think I strove for that for 7 years. And then I brought my team that I was managing. I ended up managing my team, player manager. And we brought 2 5-a-side football teams, me and my player manager, then managed each one of them. And the first year we got to the final, letting 1 goal in, got to penalties, and we lost on penalties. And I thought that was my year. And the next year we came and did it. And we didn't let a single goal in all tournament, and we won the final 2-0, scored in the final, and that feeling of elation of all of that hard work over the years and it not working out was purely incredible. And the thing that stood out for that was not only, I mean, I did sleep with the trophy. I've got to admit, I slept with the trophy that night. I know that sounds like that. I took that home and slept with it after having a few beers. But the one thing that stood out from that was we were on fire, and we just knew how to play. We were such a good team. as a collective. But one thing that stood out was another team, and it was so out of reach, this, and losing every year and often not getting out the group stages, and we bossed it for 2 years and winning on that second year. And one of the other teams, as he congratulated us, he didn't even ask the question. He just took it that we'd been training so hard and specifically for that tournament because we were that good. And when he said that, it really hit home. You know, and I spoke then about being in the moment and being aware, and when you're in it, and that awareness and really appreciating it. And it wasn't until, it was elation of victory and all of the struggle. But when somebody looked at us as a team and a collective, and just took it that we trained harder than everybody else, not because we were at such a level that we didn't essentially realize we were at, that hit home. So yeah, there was that was just awesome. And I speak with the players now, and they all say that was the best ever football moment. So it was just a real problem of that. So every year, and never thinking it would happen, but yeah, elation. So cycling shorts and sleeping with football trophies. That's probably the takeaway for you guys and our audience from this episode. But
two images that we didn't want.
Yeah, that you didn't want, but I'll try and get some photographs as well to put up on the post edit. But gentlemen, we're going to have to wrap it up once again. That's just been awesome. Love the fact that we go away and we watch a series and we're all kind of our table and as a form of discussion and it's awesome and it's so inspiring. And actually, I'm sure we can all relate how we're having conversations in our family dynamics or with friends by this process. It's so, before and as we are now and then afterwards as well, talking about it when people are inboxing and commenting on the episode. And so it's so great that we come together as a collective. Where can people find you? So if we can direct people towards yourselves and what you do and how you do it.
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Dean Booty, simple as that. And look me up.
Same with me, LinkedIn, Jonathan Leafe.
Mr. Grimshawe. Dean Grimshawe's got his own web domain. Is it deangrimshawe.com?
I didn't even have to say it.
There we go.
.com.
I'm very envious. Absolutely. And Phil and I are at wearepink.com, pink with a Q. Phil, thanks again, mate. It's always great rubbing shoulders with yourself and as we message each other as we're getting through these series and seeing how we're finding them. And gentlemen, we'll look forward to the next one. We are driven to be doing recording one of these at the end of every month. And I'm just excited to know what the next series is that we explore, or even if it's a one episode subject that we drill down on rather than a series. I think there's loads of ways we can approach this. But thanks again for your time. I know your time's massively valuable, so I appreciate you giving it here today for not only for us as a collective, but our viewers and listeners as well. So wish you a good day, and I look forward to our next episode together, gents.
Yeah, thanks, James.
Cheers, guys.
See you all. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Cheers, gentlemen. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Business Lockdown.
Please comment, like, share, and subscribe to help build our global community.
We look forward to seeing you all soon.